He poured wine on his pregnant ex-wife at her baby shower. He didn't spill it by accident. He didn't trip or stumble. No, Daniel walked right up to Florence, looked her dead in the eyes while she stood there 7 months pregnant, and poured that entire bottle down the front of her white maternity dress while 50 witnesses watched in frozen horror. He wanted to humiliate her, to remind her that he could still reach into her new life and destroy her peace whenever he felt like it. But what Daniel didn't know was that Florence's new husband, Andre, was on his way home at that exact moment. And when that military man walked through the door and saw what had been done to his wife, Daniel's smug smile would disappear forever. That baby shower would become the last day Daniel Johnson ever felt powerful. And everything that happened next would prove that some men protect who they love, while others destroy who they can no longer control. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Houston, London, maybe Jamaica or Canada. We want to know. Once upon a time, in a big city full of glass skyscrapers and luxury apartments, there lived a man named Daniel Johnson. He was 34 years old and everyone thought he was impressive. Daniel was the owner of Johnson Capital Consulting, a business that helped wealthy people invest their money and grow their fortunes. His office was on the 20th floor of a downtown building with a view that stretched for miles. His desk was made of dark mahogany that probably cost more than some people earned in a year. He drove a black Mercedes with leather seats that smelled like money and success. Daniel was handsome in that dangerous way that makes people ignore red flags. He had a smooth voice that could convince you of anything. His smile was bright and charming, the kind of smile that made people trust him before they should. He wore tailored suits in navy blue and charcoal gray. His shoes were always polished until they shined like mirrors. Everything about Daniel Johnson was designed to impress, to make people believe he was important, that he was someone who mattered. Business networks in the city knew his name. He got invited to galas and charity events where tickets cost $500 a plate. He shook hands with politicians and CEOs. He gave speeches about entrepreneurship and determination. Young men looked at him and said, "I want to be like that one day." They saw the car, the clothes, the confidence. They didn't see what it had cost to get those things. They didn't see who he had stepped on, who he had used, who he had broken on his way to the top. But 5 years ago, before the big office and the Mercedes and the magazine interviews, Daniel Johnson had been married to a woman named Florence Davis. And back then, Daniel Johnson had been nobody. Back then, he was just a small-time hustler with big dreams and empty pockets. He had schemes and ideas but no money to make them happen. He had ambition but no direction. He was always talking about what he was going to do, what he was going to become, but he never had a plan to actually get there. Florence Davis had met Daniel at a community business workshop. She was 25 years old, working as a nurse at the city hospital. She had warm brown eyes and a smile that made people feel safe. She believed in helping people, in taking care of people. That's why she became a nurse. That's also why she fell in love with Daniel Johnson. When Florence met Daniel, he was trying to start his consulting business but he didn't have the money for an office or even a proper website. He was living in a small apartment that barely had furniture. His car was old and broke down twice a month. Most people saw Daniel and walked right past him. But Florence saw something different. She saw potential. She saw a man with dreams who just needed someone to believe in him. And oh, how she believed in him. Florence loved Daniel with everything she had. She loved him completely, genuinely, without holding anything back. When Daniel said he needed money to rent office space, Florence gave him her savings. $4,000 she had been putting away for 2 years. She handed it over without hesitation because she believed in his dream. When Daniel said he needed to quit his part-time job to focus on building the business, Florence worked extra shifts at the hospital. Double shifts, overnight shifts, weekend shifts until her body ached and her feet burned. She came home exhausted but she never complained because she was investing in their future, in his success. When Daniel's business proposals got rejected by investors, Florence held him while he cried. She told him he was brilliant, that those investors were fools who couldn't see his vision. She built him back up every single time the world knocked him down. When Daniel needed a car to meet with clients, Florence co-signed the loan even though it meant risking her own credit. When Daniel wanted to take courses to improve his business skills, Florence paid for them. She paid his rent when he couldn't. She bought his food when he had no money. She defended him to her family when they said he was using her. Her mother had warned her. "That man is taking advantage of you, Florence. He's draining you dry." But Florence had defended Daniel. "Mama, you don't understand. He's building something. He just needs support right now. When we succeed, we'll succeed together." Her friends had warned her too. Girl, when is he going to start contributing? When is he going to take care of you for a change? But Florence had brushed them off. You don't know him like I do. He's going to make it. I know he is. And when he does, it will all be worth it. Florence believed in Daniel Johnson when nobody else did. She sacrificed everything for him. She made herself smaller so he could feel bigger. She dimmed her own light so his could shine brighter. She poured all her energy, all her money, all her love into this man because she truly believed they were building a life together. And then, after 3 years of Florence's sacrifice, something finally happened. Daniel landed his first major client. A wealthy businessman who needed help managing his investment portfolio. That one client led to another, then another. Within 6 months, Daniel's consulting business was actually making real money. Within a year, he had enough clients to hire an assistant. Within 2 years, he had a real office downtown and a growing reputation in the business community. Daniel Johnson was finally becoming the success he had always talked about being. His bank account was growing. His client list was expanding. His name was starting to mean something in the city. He was invited to networking events and business conferences. He was making the kind of money Florence had dreamed about when she was working those double shifts and giving him her savings. Everything Florence had sacrificed for, everything she had believed in, was finally coming true. She should have been happy. They should have been celebrating together. This was supposed to be their victory, their reward for all those hard years. But something happened to Daniel Johnson when he finally got money and success. Something ugly. Something that had maybe been inside him all along, just waiting for the right conditions to emerge. Success didn't make Daniel grateful. It made him arrogant. Money didn't make him humble. It made him cruel. Recognition didn't make him appreciate the woman who had built him up. It made him forget her completely. Daniel started looking at Florence differently. She was still working as a nurse, still wearing her scrubs, still coming home tired from her shifts. But now, instead of appreciating her sacrifice, Daniel saw her as ordinary. She wasn't glamorous enough for the new life he was building. She didn't fit the image he wanted to project. She reminded him of who he used to be, and Daniel wanted to forget that version of himself completely. He started coming home later and later. He stopped answering her phone calls during the day. When she asked about his work, he gave short, dismissive answers. You wouldn't understand, Florence. It's complicated business stuff. When she tried to celebrate his successes with him, he acted annoyed, like her presence was an inconvenience. Then the cheating started. Daniel began attending fancy parties and events, and he stopped inviting Florence. He said things like, "It's just business networking. You'd be bored." But Florence would see photos on social media later. Photos of Daniel at those events with other women. Beautiful women in expensive dresses. Women who looked like they belonged in his new world. When Florence confronted him, Daniel got angry. You're being insecure. Those women are clients. This is networking. This is how business works. You're too sensitive. He made her feel crazy for having normal reactions to his obvious betrayal. He twisted everything until Florence started doubting her own perceptions. Maybe she was being too sensitive. Maybe this was just how business worked at his level. Maybe she needed to be more understanding, more supportive. But deep down, Florence knew the truth. She knew what was happening. She just didn't want to admit that the man she had sacrificed everything for was throwing her away now that he didn't need her anymore. The verbal abuse started slowly, like poison dripping into water. Little comments here and there. You know, Florence, you should really do something about your appearance. My clients' wives, they take care of themselves. Or, maybe you should consider a different career. Nursing is fine, but it's not exactly impressive. Each comment was designed to make her feel small, inadequate, not good enough for the new Daniel Johnson. And it worked. Florence started doubting herself. She looked in the mirror and wondered if she was pretty enough, successful enough, interesting enough. She tried to change for him. She bought new clothes she couldn't really afford. She changed her hair. She tried to talk about things she thought would interest him. But nothing was ever enough. Daniel's contempt for her only grew stronger. Then came the night that changed everything. Florence got sick. Really sick. She collapsed at work and was rushed to the emergency room. The doctors ran tests and discovered she had a serious infection that had spread to her bloodstream. She was admitted to the hospital, the same hospital where she worked, but this time as a patient fighting for her life. Florence was scared. She was in pain. She needed her husband. She called Daniel from her hospital bed, her voice weak and frightened. "Baby, I'm in the hospital. I need you. Please come." Daniel's response was cold. Detached. "Florence, I'm in the middle of an important meeting. Can this wait?" "Can this wait?" she repeated, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Daniel, I'm in the hospital. I'm really sick. I need you here." There was a long pause. Then Daniel sighed, the kind of sigh people make when they're annoyed by an inconvenience. "Look, I'll try to stop by later if I can. But I have clients to deal with. I can't just drop everything." He never came. Not that night. Not the next day. Not even when her doctor called him and explained how serious her condition was. Daniel Johnson, the man Florence had saved, the man she had built up from nothing, couldn't be bothered to visit his wife in the hospital when she was fighting for her life. Florence lay in that hospital bed for 5 days. Her co-workers checked on her. Her friends brought her flowers. Her mother sat beside her bed and held her hand. But her husband? The man who had vowed to love her in sickness and in health? He was nowhere to be found. When Florence finally came home from the hospital, weak and still recovering, she found Daniel packing a suitcase. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just kept folding his designer shirts, the ones Florence's money had helped him buy, and placing them carefully in his luggage. "What are you doing?" Florence asked, though somewhere deep inside she already knew the answer. Daniel finally looked at her. His face was blank, emotionless, like he was looking at a stranger. "I'm leaving, Florence. This isn't working anymore." "This isn't working?" Her voice cracked. "Daniel, I just got out of the hospital. I almost died." He shrugged. Actually shrugged. "I know, and I'm sorry about that. But I can't keep pretending anymore. We've grown apart. We want different things. We're different people now." "Different people?" Florence felt like she was going insane. "I'm the same person I've always been. I'm the same person who believed in you when you had nothing. I'm the same person who sacrificed everything so you could succeed. And I appreciate that," Daniel said, his voice cold and rehearsed, like he had practiced this speech. "I really do. But that was then. This is now. I need someone who fits my lifestyle, someone who understands my world." The truth hit Florence like a physical blow. "There's someone else, isn't there?" Daniel didn't even try to deny it. "Her name is Simone. She's a marketing executive. We met at a conference 6 months ago. She gets me, Florence. She understands the pressures I'm under, the world I operate in." 6 months. He had been with this woman for 6 months. While Florence was working, supporting him, loving him, he had been building a new life with someone else. "After everything I did for you?" Florence's voice was barely a whisper. "After everything I gave up, everything I sacrificed?" Daniel picked up his suitcase. "Nobody asked you to do all that, Florence. You made those choices yourself. Don't put that on me." And just like that he walked out. He took his expensive clothes, his success, his new life, and he left. He left behind the woman who had built him. He discarded her like she was nothing, like she was trash, like their marriage had meant nothing at all. Florence stood in their apartment, the apartment she was still paying most of the rent for, and something inside her broke. Not just her heart. Her spirit. Her sense of self. Everything she had believed about love, about loyalty, about sacrifice, shattered into a million pieces. The divorce was quick and brutal. Daniel had hired an expensive lawyer who made sure he kept most of the assets even though Florence's money had helped build his business. He fought her on everything. He was cruel, vindictive, determined to make sure she walked away with as little as possible. Florence's friends and family were furious, but she was too broken to fight. She just wanted it to be over. She signed the papers, gave him what he wanted, and tried to move on with her life. But moving on wasn't easy. The betrayal had damaged something deep inside her. She developed anxiety that made her heart race at random moments. She had nightmares about being abandoned, about being used. She found it hard to trust anyone, hard to believe that anyone could truly love her for who she was. For 2 years after the divorce, Florence barely lived. She existed. She went to work, came home, slept, and repeated the cycle. She avoided social events. She turned down dates. She built walls around her heart so high that nobody could climb them. Her mother worried about her. Her friends tried to pull her back into life. But Florence was trapped in her trauma, reliving the betrayal over and over in her mind. Meanwhile, Daniel Johnson continued to thrive. His business grew bigger. His bank account grew fatter. He married Simone in a lavish ceremony that was featured in a local lifestyle magazine. He posted photos on social media of his perfect life, his perfect wife, his perfect success story. He never mentioned Florence. He erased her from his history completely, as if she had never existed, as if her sacrifice had meant nothing. But then, slowly, something began to shift in Florence. It started with therapy. Her mother finally convinced her to see a counselor who specialized in trauma and emotional abuse. At first, Florence resisted. She didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to relive the pain. But her therapist was patient and gentle, and eventually Florence began to open up. She talked about the marriage, about the sacrifice, about the abandonment. She talked about how small Daniel had made her feel, how he had convinced her that his betrayal was somehow her fault. And as she talked, as she examined what had happened to her, something began to heal inside her. Her therapist helped her understand that Daniel's treatment of her wasn't a reflection of her worth. It was a reflection of his character. She learned that she had been a victim of narcissistic abuse, that Daniel had used her and discarded her according to a pattern that had nothing to do with who she was as a person. Slowly, painfully, Florence began to rebuild herself. She started saying yes to invitations from friends. She joined a book club. She took up yoga. She began to remember who she had been before Daniel Johnson had entered her life and torn it apart. And then, 3 years after her divorce, Florence met Andre Thompson. And everything changed again. Andre Thompson was not like any man Florence had ever met. She met him at her friend Monica's backyard barbecue on a warm Saturday afternoon. Florence almost didn't go to that barbecue. She had been planning to stay home, to spend another weekend alone with her books and her carefully constructed walls. But Monica had called her that morning and practically begged. "Florence, please. You've been hiding for 3 years. Just come for an hour. Eat some food, see some people, and if you hate it, you can leave. I promise I won't try to set you up with anybody." So Florence went. She put on a simple yellow sundress, pulled her hair into a ponytail, and drove to Monica's house with no expectations whatsoever. The backyard was full of people laughing, talking, eating ribs and potato salad. Music played from a speaker. Children ran around with water guns. It was the kind of scene that used to make Florence happy, back before Daniel had broken something inside her. She was standing by the drinks table trying to decide between lemonade and iced tea, when a deep voice behind her said, "The lemonade is better. Monica makes it from scratch." Florence turned around and found herself looking up at a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He was wearing jeans and a simple gray t-shirt that showed off broad shoulders. There was something calm about him, something steady that made her feel inexplicably safe. "Thanks for the tip," Florence said, reaching for the lemonade. "I'm Andre," he said, extending his hand. "Florence," she replied, shaking it. His grip was firm but gentle. They talked for 10 minutes by that drinks table. Then 20 minutes. Then an hour. Andre told her he was in the military, a staff sergeant who had just returned from a deployment overseas. He talked about his work with quiet pride but without arrogance. He asked her about her job as a nurse, and when she told him about the hospital, he listened like he was genuinely interested in what she had to say. There was no game playing with Andre. No smooth lines or practiced charm. He was direct and honest in a way that felt refreshing after Daniel's manipulation. When Florence mentioned she had been married before, Andre didn't pry. He just nodded and said, "We've all got history. That's what makes us who we are." By the time Florence left that barbecue, she had Andre's phone number in her phone and something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. They started dating slowly, carefully. Andre seemed to understand without being told that Florence needed patience. He didn't rush her. He didn't pressure her. Their first date was coffee at a quiet cafe. Their second date was a walk through the botanical gardens. Their third date was dinner at a small Italian restaurant where they talked for 3 hours and Florence found herself laughing, really laughing for the first time in forever. Andre was everything Daniel had never been. He was emotionally present. When Florence talked, he listened with his full attention. When she had a bad day at work, he asked her about it and actually cared about her answer. When she mentioned liking a certain flower, he showed up at her door the next week with a bouquet of those exact flowers. But what struck Florence most was how Andre made her feel safe. He never raised his voice. He never made her feel small or inadequate. He celebrated her accomplishments instead of competing with them. When Florence got a promotion at the hospital, Andre took her out to dinner to celebrate. He told everyone they met that night with genuine pride, "This is Florence. She just got promoted to charge nurse. She's amazing at what she does." Daniel had always made her feel like her career was inferior, unimpressive. But Andre respected her work, valued it, saw her as an equal partner. Still, Florence held back. She didn't tell Andre everything about her marriage to Daniel. She mentioned that her ex-husband had been difficult, that the divorce had been painful, but she didn't share the full extent of the abuse, the betrayal, the trauma. She was afraid that if Andre knew how broken she had been, he might see her differently. He might see her as damaged goods. But Andre was patient. He never pushed her to reveal more than she was ready to share. He just kept showing up, kept being steady, kept loving her with a consistency that slowly began to heal the wounds Daniel had left behind. 6 months into their relationship, Andre asked Florence to move in with him. She said yes. They found a beautiful townhouse in a quiet neighborhood with a small backyard and big windows that let in plenty of light. It was the kind of home Florence had dreamed about, the kind of peaceful, stable life she thought she'd never have again. A year after they met, Andre proposed. It wasn't some elaborate public spectacle. It was just the two of them on the couch on a random Tuesday night watching a movie. During a commercial break, Andre turned to her and said, "Florence, I love you. I love who you are, I love who we are together, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me?" He pulled out a simple, elegant ring. Not flashy or expensive like the one Daniel had given her, but beautiful in its simplicity. Florence said yes through tears. Happy tears this time. Healing tears. They got married 3 months later at the courthouse with just their closest friends and family present. Florence wore a simple cream-colored dress. Andre wore his military dress uniform. The ceremony was short and sweet, but when Andre said his vows, when he promised to love her, protect her, and stand by her side through everything, Florence believed him. And that belief felt like a miracle. For the first time in years, Florence felt like she was truly living again. She had a husband who loved her, a home that felt safe, a life that felt full of possibility. The trauma of Daniel Johnson was becoming a distant memory, something that had happened to a different version of herself. Then, for months into their marriage, Florence discovered she was pregnant. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Florence had been feeling tired and slightly nauseous for about a week. At first, she thought it was just stress from work or maybe she was coming down with something. But when her period was 5 days late, something told her to take a test. She bought 3 pregnancy tests on her way home from work and took them all in the bathroom while Andre was still at the base. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, hands shaking, watching as those little lines appeared on each test. Positive. All 3 of them. Positive. Florence sat there for a long time just staring at those tests. Baby. She was going to have a baby. With Andre. A child that would grow up in a home filled with love and stability, not manipulation and cruelty. The tears came suddenly and overwhelmingly. Happy tears, grateful tears, disbelieving tears. This baby represented everything her past had tried to steal from her. Safety. Stability. Real love. This child would never know what it felt like to watch a parent being abused. This child would grow up seeing what real partnership looked like. When Andre came home that evening, Florence was sitting on the couch with the 3 pregnancy tests lined up on the coffee table. He walked in, saw her face, saw the tests, and for a moment he just stood there frozen. Then his face broke into the biggest smile Florence had ever seen. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, lifted her up, and spun her around gently. "We're having a baby?" His voice cracked with emotion. "We're having a baby," Florence confirmed. Andre set her down carefully like she was made of glass, then knelt down and placed both hands on her still flat stomach. "Hi baby," he whispered. "I'm your dad. And I promise you, I'm going to protect you and your mama for the rest of my life." Florence ran her fingers through Andre's hair and felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Complete, total peace. The pregnancy progressed beautifully. Andre was attentive and protective without being overbearing. He went to every doctor's appointment, asked questions, took notes. He read books about pregnancy and childbirth. He started building a crib in the spare bedroom, turning it into a nursery with soft blue walls and white furniture. Florence glowed. Her friends and co-workers commented on how happy she looked, how pregnancy suited her. For the first time in years, Florence felt beautiful. She felt cherished. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. But pregnancy also did something unexpected. It cracked open memories Florence thought she had buried. The vulnerability of being pregnant, of being dependent on someone, triggered old fears. Sometimes, late at night, she would wake up in a panic, her heart racing, remembering how Daniel had treated her when she was at her most vulnerable, when she was sick in the hospital. Andre would wake up when she did. He never got annoyed or frustrated. He would just pull her close and hold her until the panic passed. "I'm not him," Andre would whisper. "I'm never going to abandon you. I'm never going to hurt you." And Florence believed him. But the trauma still lingered, hiding in the corners of her mind, waiting for the right moment to resurface. By the time Florence reached 7 months pregnant, she was visibly showing, her belly round and prominent. The baby was active, kicking and moving constantly. The doctor said everything looked perfect. They were having a girl. A daughter. Florence was going to have a daughter. Monica suggested throwing Florence a baby shower. At first, Florence hesitated. She didn't want anything big or elaborate. But Monica insisted. "Let us celebrate you, Florence. Let us celebrate this beautiful new chapter. You deserve joy. You deserve to be celebrated." So Florence agreed. Monica planned an intimate, elegant baby shower at Florence's townhouse. Just close friends and family. Soft decorations in yellows and whites. Good food. Laughter. Love. The date was set for a Saturday afternoon in late spring. Andre would be there too, at least for part of it. He had some duties at the base that morning but promised to be home by early afternoon. Everything was planned perfectly. Everything was supposed to be beautiful. But what Florence didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that 3 weeks before the baby shower, Daniel Johnson had heard the news. It happened through mutual connections, the way gossip always travels in a city. Someone who knew Florence mentioned that she was married again. Mentioned that she was pregnant. Mentioned that she looked happy. And when Daniel heard that news, something dark twisted inside him. He was sitting in his office when one of his business associates mentioned it casually. "Hey, you know your ex-wife Florence? I heard she got remarried. Actually, I heard she's pregnant now. Good for her, right?" Daniel's jaw clenched. His hand tightened around his expensive pen until his knuckles turned white. "Is that so?" he said, his voice carefully neutral. But inside Daniel was seething. How dare she? How dare Florence move on? How dare she be happy? How dare she build a new life like he hadn't mattered at all? He had discarded her, not the other way around. He was supposed to be the one who upgraded, who moved forward, who won. Her happiness felt like a personal insult. Like she was publicly announcing that she hadn't needed him after all, that she was better off without him. And Daniel Johnson couldn't stand that narrative. In the weeks that followed, Daniel became obsessed. He found himself thinking about Florence constantly. He looked her up on social media, though she had blocked him years ago. He asked people about her, casual questions designed to seem like idle curiosity. "Oh, Florence is pregnant? That's nice. Who's the new husband?" He learned that the new husband was military. Some guy named Andre Thompson. A sergeant or something. Daniel felt a flash of contempt. Military? So she downgraded from a successful businessman to some government employee. He told himself that made him feel better, but it didn't. Because the reports all said the same thing. Florence looked happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy. And that happiness haunted Daniel. Because it meant she had healed from what he'd done to her. It meant he hadn't broken her permanently. It meant he didn't have power over her anymore. The more Daniel thought about it, the more agitated he became. He started picking fights with Simone, his wife. Nothing she did was right anymore. The marriage that had seemed so perfect was showing cracks. Simone complained that Daniel was distant, distracted, angry all the time. But Daniel couldn't explain what was eating at him. He couldn't admit that he was obsessing over his ex-wife's new life, that her happiness made him feel like a failure somehow. Then, 2 weeks before the baby shower, Daniel made a decision. He told himself he just wanted closure. He told himself he just wanted to see how she was doing, to wish her well, to prove to himself that he was the bigger person. But deep down, in the dark places he didn't want to examine, Daniel knew the truth. He wanted to remind Florence that he could still reach her. He wanted to inject himself back into her life, to make her think about him again, to disturb the peace she had found. He wanted to hurt her one more time. Daniel started making inquiries. Through the same gossip network that had brought him the news of her pregnancy, he learned about the baby shower. The date. The location. Her townhouse address. He told himself he would just stop by briefly. Congratulate her. Show that there were no hard feelings. Be civil and mature. But as the date approached, Daniel's intentions grew darker. He imagined walking into that baby shower, seeing Florence with her pregnant belly, surrounded by people celebrating her new life. He imagined the look on her face when she saw him. The fear. The discomfort. The loss of peace. And he wanted that. God help him, he wanted to take her peace away. The night before the baby shower, Daniel barely slept. He lay in bed next to Simone, staring at the ceiling, planning what he would say, how he would play it. Charm first. Then subtle digs. Reminders of the past. Just enough to unsettle her, to make her remember that he had once owned her completely. On the morning of the baby shower, Daniel woke up with a sense of purpose. He showered, shaved carefully, dressed in one of his most expensive suits. He looked at himself in the mirror and practiced his smile. Charming. Non-threatening. Friendly. He grabbed a bottle of expensive red wine from his collection. A gift for the mother-to-be, he told himself. Classy. Appropriate. But as he held that bottle, a different image flashed through his mind. An image of that wine not being drunk, but... No. He pushed the thought away. He was just going to visit. Just going to say hello. Nothing more. But as Daniel drove across the city toward Florence's address, that dark thought kept returning. And with each mile, with each minute, the little voice of restraint in his head grew quieter. By the time Daniel pulled up outside Florence's townhouse, the voice was completely silent. He sat in his car for a moment looking at the house. It was nice. Modest but well kept. Balloons decorated the front porch. He could hear music and laughter coming from inside. Her new life. Her happiness. Her peace. Daniel grabbed the bottle of wine and got out of the car. He was going to destroy that peace. And he was going to enjoy every second of it. What Daniel didn't know was that Andre Thompson had been called in for an emergency briefing at the base that morning. A situation had developed that required immediate attention. Andre had kissed Florence goodbye, promised he'd be back as soon as possible, apologized profusely for missing the start of the shower. Don't worry, Florence had told him, smiling. It's mostly going to be women talking about babies anyway. Just get here when you can. So when Daniel Johnson walked up to that front door, when he rang that doorbell with his practiced smile and his expensive wine, Andre Thompson was miles away, completely unaware that the man who had nearly destroyed his wife was about to step back into her life. The door opened. Monica stood there, confused. Can I help you? Hi, Daniel said, turning on the charm. I'm an old friend of Florence's. I heard about the baby shower and wanted to stop by and congratulate her. Monica's eyes narrowed slightly. Something about this man set off alarm bells. And you are? Daniel, he said. Daniel Johnson. Monica's face went pale. She knew that name. Florence had told her about the ex-husband, about what he'd done. This was him. The monster who had used Florence and thrown her away. I don't think Monica started. But Daniel was already stepping forward, using his size and confidence to move past her. Oh, come on. I just want to say hello. No drama. I promise. And before Monica could stop him, Daniel Johnson walked into Florence Thompson's baby shower, carrying a bottle of red wine and intentions darker than anyone in that room could imagine. The room fell silent the moment Daniel Johnson stepped inside. Not immediately. First there were a few seconds where people kept talking, kept laughing, unaware that a predator had just entered the space. Then one by one, conversations died. Heads turned. The music seemed to fade into the background. And then Florence saw him. She was standing near the gift table, holding a tiny pink onesie that someone had just given her, smiling at something her coworker had said. Then her eyes drifted toward the door and landed on Daniel Johnson. The onesie fell from her hands. Time seemed to stop. Florence's vision tunneled. The room, the people, the decorations, everything disappeared except for that face. That smile. That man who had broken her so completely that it had taken years to put the pieces back together. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, covering it, protecting her baby from a threat that the child couldn't possibly understand yet. But Florence understood. Her body remembered even if her mind tried to tell her she was safe now. Her heart started racing. Her breathing became shallow. Her legs felt weak. This was a panic attack. She recognized the symptoms. Her therapist had taught her techniques to manage them. But none of that knowledge mattered now. Because Daniel Johnson was standing in her living room in her home, on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her new life. Monica moved quickly to Florence's side. Breathe, she whispered. Just breathe. I'll get him out of here. But before Monica could move, Daniel was already walking further into the room, that charming smile plastered on his face like a mask. He held up the bottle of wine. Florence, look at you. Congratulations on the baby. You look. He paused, his eyes moving deliberately over her pregnant body. Different. The way he said that word, different, made Florence's skin crawl. It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment. A judgment. A reminder that he still felt entitled to have opinions about her body. Florence's Aunt Linda, a strong-voiced woman in her 60s who had never liked Daniel even during the marriage, stepped forward. Who invited you here? Daniel's smile didn't falter. Nobody invited me. I invited myself. Is that a crime? I heard my ex-wife was having a baby and I wanted to offer my congratulations. We may not be married anymore, but surely we can be civil, right, Florence? He was putting her on the spot. Making her look like the unreasonable one if she asked him to leave. Making himself look magnanimous and mature while everyone else looked hostile. It was classic Daniel. Always controlling the narrative. Florence tried to speak but her throat was tight. She managed to whisper, "You need to leave." Daniel cupped his ear theatrically. "I'm sorry, what was that?" I couldn't hear you. She said you need to leave, Monica said loudly, firmly. Daniel laughed. Actually laughed. Come on, ladies. I drove all the way across town. At least let me stay for a few minutes. I brought wine. He held up the bottle again. It's a 2021 Cabernet. Very expensive. Top shelf. Only the best for Florence. He was playing to the audience now, to the confused guests who didn't know the history, who were seeing a well-dressed, charming man being treated hostilely for apparently no reason. Florence's younger cousin Jasmine whispered to her friend, "Who is that?" "That's her ex-husband," someone whispered back. "The one who dash." But the whispers didn't spread fast enough. Half the room didn't know who Daniel was or what he had done. They just saw an uncomfortable situation developing at what was supposed to be a joyful event. Daniel moved deeper into the room, his eyes scanning the decorations, the gifts, the people. "This is nice," he said. "Really nice. Modest but nice. I'm happy for you, Florence. Really I am. You've built yourself a little life here." The way he said little was designed to diminish everything, to make her new life seem inferior to the life he was living. Monica moved to stand between Daniel and Florence. "You have 5 seconds to walk back out that door before I call the police." Daniel held up his hands in mock surrender. Whoa. Let's not escalate things. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just here to pay my respects to the mother-to-be." He looked past Monica directly at Florence. "Where's the new husband? I heard you upgraded to a military man. Is he here? I'd love to meet him." The question was designed to hurt. Upgraded. Like Andre was a replacement, like Florence's new marriage was some kind of competitive response to Daniel rather than genuine love. "He's not here," Florence managed to say, her voice still weak. Daniel's smile grew wider. "Oh, he's not here? On the day of your baby shower? That's interesting. What kind of husband misses his wife's baby shower?" "He's working," Monica snapped. "Some people have actual responsibilities." "I'm sure he does," Daniel said smoothly. "Military men are very dedicated. To their country. Sometimes less so to their families, but I'm sure he's different." He was twisting the knife now, planting seeds of doubt, trying to make Florence question Andre even though Andre had done nothing wrong. Florence's friend Keisha, who had known her during the marriage and had witnessed some of Daniel's cruelty firsthand, pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police. You're trespassing." "Trespassing?" Daniel laughed. The door was open. "I walked in. That's not trespassing. That's visiting." He moved toward the refreshment table, setting down the wine bottle with deliberate care. "See? I've even brought a gift. That's what good people do at baby showers, right? They bring gifts." The tension in the room was suffocating. Some guests were edging toward the door, uncomfortable with the confrontation. Others were pulling out their phones, some to call for help, others to record what was happening. Daniel noticed the phones. "Oh, we're recording now? Perfect. Let's make sure we capture this moment. Me being a gracious ex-husband trying to congratulate Florence on her pregnancy, and her friends treating me like a criminal. Very classy." He was trying to control the story that would be told later, the narrative that would spread through social media and gossip circles. Florence felt like she was going to faint. The room was spinning. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Not on what was supposed to be a day of celebration. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please just go." Daniel's mask slipped for just a second. Something cold and cruel flashed in his eyes. "Please? You're saying please to me? After you moved on? After you got pregnant with another man's baby? After you built this whole new life like our marriage meant nothing?" There it was. The real reason he had come. Not to congratulate her. To punish her for daring to be happy without him. "Our marriage ended because of you," Florence said, her voice growing stronger even as tears started to fall. "You cheated. You lied. You abandoned me when I needed you most." "I abandoned you?" Daniel's voice rose. "I gave you everything. I built a business, I made something of myself, and you couldn't keep up. You were dead weight, Florence. You held me back." The room gasped. Several women started shouting at Daniel to leave. Monica stepped forward, her phone in her hand. "The police are on their way. You need to go. Now." But Daniel wasn't done. He had come here with a purpose, and he wasn't leaving until he'd accomplished it. He picked up the wine bottle, turning it in his hands, looking at Florence with an expression that sent ice through her veins. "You know what I realized, Florence? You used me. You threw your money at me, made me dependent on you, made me feel guilty for every dollar you spent. You bought me. And then when I finally succeeded, when I finally became someone, you wanted to claim credit for it. Like I was your creation. Like I owed you something. You did owe me something, Florence said, her voice shaking with anger now, not just fear. You owed me respect. You owed me loyalty. You owed me the same love I gave you. Daniel laughed bitterly. Love? You call that love? That was control, Florence. That was manipulation. You wanted to keep me small, keep me dependent, so I would never leave you. He was rewriting history right in front of everyone, turning himself into the victim, painting Florence as the abuser. It was so twisted, so insane that several people in the room started shouting at him. Get out. You're crazy. She's pregnant, you psycho. But Daniel's eyes stayed locked on Florence. And in that moment, Florence saw something that terrified her. She saw that Daniel hadn't just come here to talk. He had come here to do something. Something bad. Daniel, she said carefully, watching him grip the wine bottle. Don't do anything stupid. He smiled. That cold, cruel smile she remembered from the worst days of their marriage. Stupid? I'm not the one who's stupid, Florence. You're stupid for thinking you could just move on, just forget about me, just erase me from your story. He started walking toward her. Monica and two other women immediately moved to block him, but Daniel was bigger, stronger, and he had the element of surprise. He pushed past them, not violently but firmly, and suddenly he was standing right in front of Florence. She backed up until she hit the wall. Her hands protectively covered her belly. Don't, she whispered. Please don't. For a moment, Daniel just stared at her. At her pregnant body, at her fear, at her vulnerability. And something in his expression shifted. Something dark and satisfied. This baby, he said softly so only she could hear. This new life you're building. It's all fake, Florence. You know that, right? You're just trying to replace what we had. But you can't. Because what we had was real. And this. He gestured at her belly. This is just you pretending to be over me. I am over you, Florence said, her voice stronger than she felt. I'm happy. I'm loved. I'm safe. Everything you never gave me. That was the trigger. That statement. That declaration of happiness. That proof that she had healed without him. Daniel's face twisted with rage. His jaw clenched. His eyes went cold. And in that moment, Florence saw the man she had spent years trying to forget. The man who had destroyed her piece by piece until there was almost nothing left. The room had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching this confrontation unfold, sensing that something terrible was about to happen but unable to stop it. Time seemed to move in slow motion. Daniel's hand tightened around the bottle of expensive red wine. His knuckles went white. And then, with deliberate, calculated cruelty, he lifted that bottle high. Then let me remind you, he said quietly, his voice dripping with venom, that you'll never truly be free of me. And before anyone could stop him, before anyone could move or shout or intervene, Daniel Johnson poured that entire bottle of red wine directly onto Florence's white maternity dress. The wine cascaded down like blood. It splashed against her chest, soaked through the delicate fabric, ran down her swollen belly, dripped onto her legs and pooled at her feet. The white dress that had looked so beautiful moments ago was now stained crimson, ruined, destroyed. The room erupted in gasps and screams. Oh my God. What is wrong with you? Call the police. Time froze. Florence stood there completely still, arms wrapped protectively around her belly, wine dripping from her hair, her face, her dress. She was soaked, shaking, humiliated in front of 50 witnesses on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life. And in that moment, all of her trauma came flooding back. Every painful memory she had tried to bury. Every moment of abuse she had tried to forget. The powerlessness, the shame, the silence, the feeling of being small and worthless and utterly alone. Her legs felt weak. Her vision blurred. She couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. This was exactly what Daniel had wanted. To strip away her dignity. To remind her of her place. To prove that no matter how far she ran, no matter how much she healed, he could still reach her. He could still hurt her. Daniel stood there with the empty bottle dangling from his fingers, a cruel smile spreading across his face. This was what he had come for. Not to congratulate her. Not to wish her well. But to destroy her peace one final time. And from the look on his face, he was satisfied with his work. Multiple people lunged toward Daniel, shouting, trying to grab him. But he just stood there, calm and collected, like he had done nothing wrong. Like pouring wine on a pregnant woman was a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Monica was screaming. You psychopath. You absolute monster. Florence's Aunt Linda had her phone out, calling 911 with shaking hands. Keisha was trying to get to Florence, trying to help her, but Florence couldn't move. She was frozen in place, trapped in her trauma, drowning in memories of every time Daniel had made her feel this way. Small, powerless, broken. Daniel looked directly at Florence, his eyes cold and triumphant. "Now we're even," he said softly. Even. Like what he had just done somehow balanced out her crime of daring to be happy without him. The room was chaos. People shouting. Some trying to comfort Florence. Others trying to restrain Daniel. Phones were out, recording everything, capturing this moment of cruelty for the world to see. And then, cutting through all the noise, came the sound that changed everything. The front door opened. Heavy. Deliberate. The sound of it was different from when Daniel had entered. This wasn't someone sneaking in uninvited. This was someone who belonged here. Someone with every right to be here. Footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor. Slow. Measured. Military precise. The chaos in the room began to quiet. One by one, people stopped shouting and turned toward the sound. The atmosphere shifted. The air itself seemed to change, to thicken with a new kind of tension. Andre Thompson walked through the door. He was still wearing his full military dress uniform from the briefing at the base. The deep blue jacket with its medals and insignia. The crisp white shirt underneath. The perfectly creased pants. The polished black shoes that reflected the light with each step. He looked like authority personified. Like justice wearing a uniform. The room fell completely silent. Andre stopped just inside the doorway. His eyes swept across the scene with the trained assessment of a soldier evaluating a combat situation. He took in everything in seconds. The overturned decorations. The terrified guests pressed against the walls. The strange man standing in the center of the room with an empty wine bottle. And then his eyes found Florence. His pregnant wife. Standing against the wall. Covered head to toe in red wine. Her white dress completely stained. Her face showing shock and trauma and humiliation. Her hands protectively wrapped around her belly. Shaking. Crying. Destroyed. Andre's jaw clenched. Every muscle in his body tensed. But his face remained calm. Dangerously, terrifyingly calm. He took in the scene instantly. His pregnant wife soaked in wine. The man standing too close to her holding an empty bottle. The way everyone in the room was positioned, like they had just witnessed something terrible but been unable to stop it. No confusion. No questions about what had happened. Only absolute clarity. Andre's eyes moved from Florence to Daniel. And in that moment, Daniel's smug expression began to falter. Because he was looking at a man who was nothing like him. A man who had been trained to handle threats. A man who protected instead of destroyed. A man who was about to become Daniel's worst nightmare. Andre took one step forward. Then another. His footsteps echoed in the silent room. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Everyone just watched as this military man in his dress uniform walked slowly, deliberately toward the man who had just assaulted his wife. Daniel tried to summon his earlier confidence. He straightened his shoulders, lifted his chin. "You must be the new husband," he said, trying to sound casual, trying to act like this was all just a misunderstanding between reasonable people. Andre didn't respond. He just kept walking forward, his eyes never leaving Daniel's face. Daniel's confidence cracked a little more. "Look, this isn't what it looks like. Florence and I, we have history. We were just having a conversation and things got a little heated. That's all." Andre stopped about 5 feet from Daniel. Close enough to be threatening without being aggressive. Close enough that Daniel could see the absolute lack of fear in Andre's eyes. When Andre finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. Steady as steel. "Is this the man who did this to you?" He asked the question without looking away from Daniel. He was asking Florence, but his eyes stayed locked on the threat in front of him. Florence's voice was small, broken. "Yes." That's all Andre needed. One word. One confirmation. That was enough. Andre didn't shout. He didn't rage. He didn't lecture or threaten or posture. He simply acted. In one fluid motion, honed by years of military training, Andre moved. He grabbed Daniel's wrist, twisted it behind his back with precisely controlled force, and had him face down on the floor in less than 3 seconds. It wasn't brutal. It wasn't violent. It was simply efficient. Professional. The way a soldier neutralizes a threat with minimal force necessary. Daniel hit the floor hard, the empty wine bottle flying from his hand and shattering against the wall. He tried to struggle, tried to fight back, but Andre's knee was on his back, his arm twisted at an angle that made any resistance painful. "Don't move," Andre said calmly. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will if you make me." The room erupted in shocked gasps and then sudden applause. People were clapping, cheering, shouting support. That's right. He deserved that. About time someone put him in his place. Daniel was face down on the floor, completely powerless. The man who had thrived on dominance and control was being controlled. The predator had become the prey. The bully was exposed for exactly what he was. A coward. Get off me. Daniel shouted, his voice muffled against the floor. You can't do this. This is assault. I'll sue you. You're going to sue me? Andre's voice was still terrifyingly calm. You just poured wine on my pregnant wife in my home. That's assault. That's harassment. That's trespassing. We have 50 witnesses and multiple videos. So please tell me more about your legal plans. Daniel stopped struggling. Reality was beginning to sink in. He had made a terrible mistake. Andre looked up at Monica. Call the police. Tell them we have an intruder who assaulted a pregnant woman. Tell them a military service member is holding him until they arrive. Monica already had her phone out. Already calling, she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline and relief. Andre looked at the other guests. Anyone who saw what happened, don't leave. The police will want statements. Then finally he looked at Florence. His expression softened immediately. Baby, are you okay? Is the baby okay? Florence nodded, tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of fear anymore. They were tears of relief. Of feeling protected. Of knowing she wasn't alone anymore. I'm okay, she whispered. We're okay. Good, Andre said. He looked down at Daniel. You're going to stay right here until the police arrive. If you try to move, if you try to run, I will stop you. And trust me, you don't want me to have to do that. Am I clear? Daniel, his face pressed against the floor, his expensive suit wrinkled and dirty, could only nod. The room watched in stunned silence as the man who had walked in with such arrogance, such cruelty, such confidence that he could hurt Florence without consequences, lay helpless on the floor. His power was gone. His control evaporated. His smug smile replaced with fear and humiliation. This woman was no longer alone. She had a protector now. A real one. Not someone who controlled her, but someone who protected her. And Daniel Johnson had just learned that lesson the hard way. Within 10 minutes, police sirens could be heard approaching the house. 2 patrol cars pulled up outside. 4 officers entered the home, their hands on their weapons until they assessed the situation. I'm Staff Sergeant Andre Thompson, Andre said, showing his military ID. This man, he gestured to Daniel, trespassed into my home, crashed my wife's baby shower, and assaulted her by pouring wine on her. She's 7 months pregnant. We have approximately 50 witnesses and multiple video recordings of the incident. The lead officer nodded, looking at Daniel with disgust. Sir, you can release him. We'll take it from here. Andre stood up, releasing Daniel's arm. 2 officers immediately moved in, pulling Daniel to his feet and putting handcuffs on him. This is ridiculous. Daniel protested. She's my ex-wife. I have a right to. You have the right to remain silent, one officer interrupted. I suggest you use it. They read Daniel his rights as they led him toward the door. Daniel looked back at Florence one last time. But instead of seeing fear in her eyes, he saw something else. Strength. Resolution. Freedom. She wasn't his victim anymore. She was someone else's wife. Someone else's priority. Someone who was loved and protected and valued. And he had lost that. Lost it through his own cruelty. And now he was being arrested, handcuffed, humiliated in front of dozens of witnesses and multiple cameras. The video would spread. His reputation would be destroyed. His business would suffer. His life would fall apart. All because he couldn't let go. All because he had to have one last moment of control. As the police led Daniel out of the house, the guests erupted in applause again. Justice had been served. Not through revenge or violence, but through truth and consequences. After the police left with Daniel, after they had taken statements from multiple witnesses, after the chaos had finally settled, Andre turned his full attention to Florence. He crossed the room to where she still stood, still covered in wine, still shaking. Without a word, he took off his military dress jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, covering the stained dress. Come here, he said softly, pulling her gently into his arms. Florence collapsed against him, crying into his chest. Not tears of trauma this time. Tears of release. Of relief. Of feeling safe for the first time since Daniel had walked through that door. I've got you, Andre whispered, holding her close, one hand protectively on her back, the other carefully avoiding her pregnant belly. Nobody's ever going to hurt you again. I promise you that. He ruined everything, Florence sobbed. The baby shower, my dress, everything. No, Andre said firmly, pulling back to look at her face. He tried to ruin it, but he failed. Because you're still here. You're still strong. And in a few months, we're going to have a beautiful daughter. He can't touch that. He can't ruin what we have. Monica approached carefully. Florence, honey, let's get you upstairs and into clean clothes. You'll feel better? Florence nodded. Andre helped her to the stairs and watched as Monica and two other women guided her up to the bedroom. Once she was gone, Andre turned to face the remaining guests. Thank you, he said simply. Thank you for protecting my wife as best you could. Thank you for being witnesses. Thank you for being here. That man is crazy, Aunt Linda said, shaking her head. To do that to a pregnant woman. What kind of monster does that? The kind that's going to prison, Andre said firmly. I'm pressing every charge possible. Assault, harassment, trespassing, whatever else the lawyers can think of. He's done. Over the next several days, the consequences for Daniel Johnson came swift and severe. The video of him pouring wine on a pregnant woman went viral. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed over 2 million times. The comments were brutal. This is sick. Who does this to a pregnant woman? He should be in jail for the rest of his life. This is what a narcissist looks like. Scary. Daniel's business partners saw the video and immediately released statements distancing themselves from him. Johnson Capital Consulting does not represent our values. We are severing all business relationships effective immediately. His clients canceled their contracts. Nobody wanted to work with a man who would assault a pregnant woman at her baby shower. The local news picked up the story. Local businessman arrested for assaulting pregnant ex-wife. They interviewed legal experts who said Daniel could face serious jail time. Simone, Daniel's wife, was horrified when she saw the video. She had known Daniel could be cold, even cruel. But this was a level of cruelty she hadn't imagined. She filed for divorce 3 days after his arrest, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abuse. The business that Daniel had built, the reputation he had carefully crafted, the image he had polished so carefully, all of it came crashing down in a matter of days. The man who had thrived on dominance and control was left with nothing. He lost his wife, his business, his reputation, his freedom. All because he couldn't let go of the need to hurt someone who no longer belonged to him. Meanwhile, Florence began a different kind of healing. This wasn't like before, where she had to bury her trauma and pretend to be okay. This time she processed it. She talked about it. She cried about it. She let herself feel all the feelings without shame. Andre was there for every moment. He held her when she cried. He listened when she needed to talk. He sat quietly when she needed silence. He never once made her feel weak or broken. You know what's crazy? Florence said one night as they lay in bed, Andre's hand resting on her belly, feeling their daughter kick. What's that? I thought seeing him again would break me. I thought it would undo all the healing I'd done. But it didn't. It hurt, yeah. It was traumatic. But I didn't break. And I think that's because of you. You didn't break because of you, Andre corrected gently. You're strong, Florence. You always have been. I just reminded you of that. He's really going to jail? He's really going to jail. The prosecutor called today. With all the video evidence and the witness statements, they're confident they'll get a conviction. He's looking at 6 months to a year, plus probation, plus mandatory counseling, plus a permanent restraining order. Florence was quiet for a moment. You know what? I don't even feel satisfied about that. I don't feel happy that he's going to jail. I just feel nothing. He's not important enough to feel anything about anymore. Andre smiled in the darkness. That's real freedom right there, baby. That's healing. I know, Florence said. And it feels good. 2 months later, Florence and Andre were sitting in their living room when the call came. Daniel had been sentenced. 8 months in county jail, 2 years probation, mandatory anger management and narcissistic personality disorder counseling, and a permanent restraining order that prohibited him from ever contacting Florence again. It's over, Andre said, hanging up the phone. It's really over. Florence placed her hand on her very pregnant belly. Their daughter was due in less than a month. It's over, she repeated. And we can finally move forward. That night, they didn't celebrate Daniel's sentencing. They didn't throw a party or gloat or feel victorious. They simply sat together, Andre's hand on Florence's belly, feeling their daughter move and kick, and felt grateful. Grateful that they had found each other. Grateful that Florence had survived. grateful that their daughter would grow up in a home filled with real love, real protection, real partnership. 3 weeks later, Florence went into labor. It was a long, difficult labor that lasted 16 hours. Andre was there the entire time, holding her hand, coaching her breathing, telling her how strong she was, how proud he was of her. And finally, at 2:37 in the morning on a Tuesday, their daughter was born. She was perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Beautiful brown skin. A head full of thick black hair. Tiny fingers that immediately wrapped around Andre's thumb when he touched her. They named her Grace. Because that's what she represented. The grace that comes after suffering. The grace that heals wounds. The grace that transforms victims into survivors. As Florence held her daughter for the first time, skin to skin, she looked up at Andre and saw tears running down his face. "We made her," Andre whispered. "We made a whole person." Florence looked down at Grace, at this tiny human who had no idea what her mother had survived to bring her into the world. This child who would grow up knowing only love and safety and protection. "She's going to have a different life than I did," Florence said softly. "She's going to grow up seeing what real love looks like. What real partnership looks like. She's never going to doubt that she's valued and cherished." "No, she's not," Andre agreed. "Because we're going to show her every single day." Later that night, after the nurses had left them alone, after the phone calls to family had been made, after the excitement had settled into peaceful exhaustion, Florence lay in the hospital bed with Grace sleeping on her chest and Andre sleeping in the chair beside her. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The sacrifice she had made for Daniel. The betrayal. The divorce. The trauma. The healing. Meeting Andre. Falling in love again. Getting pregnant. The baby shower attack. Daniel's arrest and conviction. And now this. New life. New beginning. She realized something profound in that moment. Her revenge against Daniel Johnson had never been about destroying him. It had been about this. About surviving. About healing. About choosing a man who protected instead of controlled. About building a life so full of love and peace that Daniel's cruelty became nothing more than a distant memory. Daniel was in jail, his life in ruins, facing the consequences of his own cruelty. But Florence? Florence was in a hospital bed with her husband beside her and her daughter in her arms, surrounded by love, living a life that Daniel could never touch, never ruin, never control. She had won. Not by fighting him. Not by destroying him. But by building something so beautiful, so strong, so full of real love that his attempts to break her had failed completely. Daniel Johnson was finished. His reputation destroyed. His business gone. His freedom taken. The man who had tried to keep Florence small had been exposed as exactly what he was. A bully. A coward. A man so empty inside that he could only feel powerful by making others feel weak. And Florence Thompson? She was free. Truly, completely free. Free from trauma. Free from fear. Free from the past. Free to live the life she had always deserved. Her daughter would inherit peace, not trauma. Grace would grow up in a home where love meant protection, not control. Where partnership meant building each other up, not tearing each other down. Where marriage meant safety, not survival. That was Florence's legacy. Not the pain she had endured, but the life she had built in spite of it. As she drifted off to sleep, with Grace's tiny heartbeat against her chest and Andre's hand wrapped around hers, Florence smiled. She had survived the unthinkable. She had healed from wounds that should have been fatal. She had learned to love again, to trust again, to hope again. And now she was a mother. A wife. A survivor. A thriver. Daniel Johnson had tried to destroy her. But in the end, he had only made her stronger. And that was the greatest victory of all. I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in the next one.
5 years. That's how long Louisa hid her true identity, waiting to see if her husband loved her for who she was, not what she came from. But tonight, inside the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan, the test is over. Tonight, Lucas Sterling didn't just forget their anniversary. He turned it into a public spectator sport to humiliate her. He thinks he's discarding a broken, poor waitress. He has no idea he's about to declare war on the sole heiress of the Thorne dynasty. When the doors open and the world stops, Lucas will realize that the only thing more expensive than the dinner bill is his mistake. The rain in New York City didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Louisa Vance stood outside the Obsidian Room, a restaurant so exclusive that its reservation list was shorter than the menu. She smoothed the fabric of her dress. It was a soft blue purchased off the rack at Macy's 3 years ago. She had hemmed it herself, stitching love into the fraying seams, trying to make it look like something that belonged in Lucas's world. Through the tinted glass she could see him. Lucas Sterling, her husband of 5 years. He looked every inch the rising tech mogul. His suit was a bespoke charcoal cut from Savile Row, fitting his broad shoulders perfectly. On his wrist sat a Patek Philippe Nautilus, a watch that cost more than the house Louisa grew up in. He wasn't alone. Sitting across from him wasn't Louisa. It was his mother Monica, and a woman Louisa didn't recognize, a stunning brunette draped in vintage Chanel, laughing at something Lucas had said. Louisa checked her phone. 7:00 p.m. Anniversary dinner. She took a breath that rattled in her chest, pushed open the heavy oak doors, and stepped inside. The warmth of the restaurant hit her, smelling of truffle oil, aged mahogany, and old money. The maitre d', a man named Claude, who usually sneered at her, looked at her tonight with something worse than disdain-pity. "Mrs. Sterling," Claude murmured, "your party is waiting." Louisa walked toward the table. The sound of her heels on the marble floor felt deafening, yet Lucas didn't look up. He was typing furiously on his iPhone, his brow furrowed. "Happy anniversary, Lucas," Louisa said softly, her hand resting on the back of the empty fourth chair. Lucas stopped typing. He didn't smile. He didn't stand up to pull out her chair. He simply glanced at her dress, his eyes narrowing with irritation. "You're late," he said, his voice flat. "I took the subway. The cab line was—" "The subway," Monica interjected, taking a sip of her Pinot Noir. She looked at Louisa as if she were a stain on the tablecloth. "Lucas, I told you. You can take the girl out of the trailer park, but you can't take the subway token out of the girl. It smells like damp wool in here now." The brunette giggled, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. "Sit down, Louisa," Lucas commanded, gesturing vaguely. "We have guests. This is Chloe Vanderhoven. Her father owns the hedge fund that's looking into acquiring Sterling Tech." Louisa froze. "Guests, Lucas, it's our 5th anniversary. You promised we'd have one night. Just us." Lucas finally looked at her, really looked at her, and his expression was one of exhausted boredom. "Business doesn't stop for sentimentality, Louisa. Besides, Chloe is here to help us celebrate, or rather help me celebrate the next phase." Louisa sat. She felt small. The table was cluttered with appetizers she hadn't ordered: oysters, Rockefeller Wagyu beef sliders, caviar service. "I got you something," Louisa whispered, reaching into her worn handbag. She pulled out a small rectangular box wrapped in brown paper. It wasn't a Rolex. It wasn't keys to a Bentley. It was a leather-bound journal. Inside, for the past year, she had written down one reason she loved him every single day. 365 reasons. It had taken her hours of emotional labor. Lucas stared at the brown paper package on the white tablecloth. It looked like trash. "Open it," she urged gently. Lucas sighed, picking it up with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. He tore the paper. He flipped open the journal, read the first line, and let out a short, cruel laugh. "Reason 1. I love how you look when you're sleeping because the worry leaves your face." Lucas read it aloud, mocking her sincerity. He tossed the book onto the table, where it slid and knocked over a salt shaker. "Jesus, Louisa, I'm trying to close a $50 million merger, and you're giving me a high school diary." "It's heartfelt," Louisa's voice trembled. "It's cheap," Chloe chimed in, smiling sweetly. "Lucas needs a partner who understands the magnitude of his world, sweetie, not someone who scrapbooks." Monica leaned forward, her diamond necklace catching the candlelight. "Louisa, dear, let's be realistic. Look around you. Look at the people in this room. That man over there is the CEO of Goldman Sachs. The woman by the window is a senator. And then there's you, wearing a dress that's pilling at the waist. I work hard, Louisa defended herself, tears pricking her eyes. I manage the house. I support Lucas. You hold him back. Lucas snapped, his voice rising enough for the neighboring tables to turn. The humiliation burned Louisa's cheeks. Do you know what the investors said, Louisa? They said Sterling Tech has a branding problem, and you want to know what the problem is. It's you. The silence that followed was suffocating. Me. You, Lucas hissed. You don't fit. You don't know which fork to use. You don't speak French or Italian. You can't network. You're a waitress I met at a diner 5 years ago. I thought I was being noble saving you. But I'm drowning. Louisa gripped the edge of the table. I loved you when you were working out of a garage, Lucas. I paid the rent when your first startup failed. I was the one who believed in you. That was then, Lucas said cold-heartedly. He reached into his jacket pocket. And this is now. He didn't pull out a jewelry box. He pulled out a white envelope. He slid it across the table right over the leather journal she had poured her heart into. Happy anniversary, Louisa, Lucas said. Sign them. It's a generous settlement. $10,000 and you keep the used Honda. Louisa stared at the document. Dissolution of marriage. Her heart stopped. Then it shattered. You're divorcing me. Here, in front of your mother and a stranger. Chloe isn't a stranger. Lucas smirked, reaching over to take Chloe's hand. She's my fiancée, effective as soon as you sign that paper. The air in the restaurant seemed to vanish. Louisa looked at Lucas's hand resting over Chloe's. The intimacy of it, the ease, told her this wasn't new. This had been going on for months, while Louisa was clipping coupons to save money for his business expenses. He was dining Chloe Vanderhoven. Fiancée. Louisa repeated the word, tasting like ash. It's a merger, dear, Monica said, looking delighted. The Vanderhovens and the Sterlings. It's a dynasty in the making. Chloe brings capital connections and class. You bring the check down. Louisa looked at the divorce papers. $10,000. That was the price he put on 5 years of her life. She slowly looked up. The sadness in her eyes began to harden into something else. Something colder. Something that resembled the steel of a skyscraper's skeleton. You think I'm an anchor? Louisa said quietly. I think you're a liability, Lucas corrected, checking his watch again. Look, just sign it. I have a press release going out at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow announcing the engagement and the merger. I need this done. And if I don't sign, Lucas laughed, then I'll ruin you. I have lawyers who will make sure you walk away with nothing but the debt from your student loans. I'm being nice, Louisa. Take the 10 grand. Louisa sat back. For 5 years she had played the role of the supportive, simple wife. She had promised her grandfather, the late patriarch of the Thorne family, that she would live as a normal person for 5 years before claiming her seat at the high table. She wanted to know what it felt like to be loved for herself, not for the billions attached to her surname. The timeline had expired yesterday. She looked at Lucas, really looked at him. She saw the greed, the weakness. He wasn't a king. He was a beggar in a nice suit, desperate for Chloe's father's money to save his failing tech company. I won't sign, Louisa said, her voice steady. Lucas slammed his hand on the table. The cutlery jumped. Don't be stupid, Louisa. I won't sign, she repeated, because the settlement is insulting. Not the money. The assumption. The assumption of what? Chloe asked, looking amused. The assumption that you are the one with the power here. Lucas scoffed. I am the CEO of Sterling Tech. You are a nobody, a ghost. You have no family, no money, no leverage. Louisa reached for her phone. It was an old model with a cracked screen part of her disguise. She dialed a number. Who are you calling? Monica sneered. Your shift manager at the diner going to ask for extra hours? Louisa ignored her. She held the phone to her ear. It's me, Louisa said into the receiver. Her voice shifted. The timid housewife tone vanished, replaced by an authoritative cadence that sounded aristocratically bored. Yes, I'm at the Obsidian Room. The authorization code is Alpha 70. Bring the car. And tell Uncle Sebastian he can come in now. She hung up and placed the phone face down. Lucas frowned. Uncle Sebastian, you said your family was dead. I said I had no parents, Louisa corrected. I never said I didn't have family. What is this, some pathetic attempt to scare me? Lucas mocked. Is your uncle going to come in here and yell at me? Maybe throw a drink in my face? No, Louisa said calmly. She picked up the divorce papers, ripped them in half, and dropped the pieces into her water glass. He's not coming to yell. He's coming to collect. Suddenly the atmosphere in the restaurant changed. It started at the front door. The ambient chatter of the restaurant died down, replaced by a hush that swept through the room like a wave. The maitre d' Claude was bowing, actually bowing at a 90-degree angle. Two men in black tactical suits walked in first. They weren't restaurant security. They were private military contractors. They scanned the room with professional precision. Then he entered. Sebastian Thorne. He was a man of 60, but he moved with the vitality of a man half his age. He wore a suit that wasn't just bespoke. It was a power statement. He leaned heavily on a cane topped with a silver wolf's head, but everyone knew the cane wasn't for support. It was a weapon. Sebastian Thorne was not just a billionaire. He was the shadow behind the banks. He owned shipping lines and grease tech firms in Silicon Valley and half of the real estate in Manhattan. He was a man who didn't make appointments. The world simply adjusted its schedule to fit him. The diners whispered, Is that Sebastian Thorne? I thought he was in Zurich. Why is he here? Lucas's face went pale. He recognized the man. Everyone in business recognized Sebastian Thorne. He was the idol Lucas worshipped, the level of success Lucas dreamed of but could never touch. Oh my God, Chloe whispered, her arrogance evaporating. That's the chairman of Thorne Global. Sebastian didn't look at the senator. He didn't look at the CEO of Goldman Sachs. He walked straight toward table 4. Lucas scrambled to stand up, knocking his chair over in the process. He smoothed his jacket, his hands shaking. Mr. Thorne, sir, what an honor. I'm Lucas Sterling, CEO of... Sebastian walked right past him. He didn't even acknowledge Lucas's existence. He stopped in front of Louisa. The room held its breath. Was he going to have her removed? Was he lost? Sebastian. Thorne looked down at the woman in the cheap blue dress. His hard granite face softened into a look of profound adoration. He bowed his head slightly. I apologize for the delay, Alara, Sebastian said, using her birth name. His voice was a deep baritone that carried across the silent room. Traffic on Fifth Avenue was unacceptable. I've already had the city commissioner on the line to rectify the traffic light patterns for our departure. Louisa Alara stood up. She didn't look like a waitress anymore. She looked like a queen accepting her crown. It's fine, Uncle, she said. Lucas made a sound like a dying animal. Uncle! Sebastian slowly turned his head to look at Lucas. It was the look a lion gives a gazelle before tearing out its throat. You must be the husband, Sebastian said, his voice dripping with icy politeness. The one who has spent the last hour insulting the sole heir to the Thorne Empire. Sebastian glanced at the wet, torn divorce papers floating in the water glass. And I see, Sebastian continued, a cruel smile touching his lips, that you have rejected her gift. A pity. She was going to give you access to the Thorne Trust to save your pathetic little company. But I suppose that offer is now off the table. The silence in the Obsidian Room was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals or the moment a bomb is diffused. Lucas stared at Sebastian Thorne, then at Louisa. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile the image of his wife, who clipped coupons for laundry detergent, with the woman now standing beside the most feared corporate raider in the Western Hemisphere. Alara! Lucas choked out the name, feeling foreign on his tongue. What is... I don't understand. Louisa, tell him. Tell him who we are. Louisa looked down at him. Her eyes, usually so warm and full of eager affection, were now 2 chips of blue ice. I tried to, Lucas, she said softly. For 5 years I tried to show you who I was. Not my bank account. Me. My heart. My patience. My loyalty. But you didn't want a partner. You wanted a prop. This is ridiculous, Monica Lucas's mother sputtered. She was trembling, her wine glass rattling against the coaster. She looked at Sebastian Thorne with a desperate, hungry glint in her eyes. Mr. Thorne, surely there is a misunderstanding. My daughter-in-law is... well, she's a waitress. A lovely girl, but she's from a trailer park in Ohio. We did a background check. Sebastian let out a low, rumbling laugh that sounded like thunder rolling over a valley. A background check, Sebastian mocked. You checked the identity we created for her. Do you think the Thorne family leaves digital footprints that a budget investigator can find? We bought that trailer park 3 days before she moved in. We planted the school records. We crafted a cage of mediocrity to see if your son was man enough to free her. Instead, he tried to shrink her to fit inside it. Sebastian tapped his cane on the floor. And as for the waitress job, Alara, perhaps you should explain why you were working at that diner. Louisa smoothed her dress. I was studying people, Lucas. My grandfather believed that to lead an empire, you have to understand the people who build it. I spent a year serving coffee to learn humility. I met you there. I saw a man working on a laptop dreaming of changing the world with code. I fell in love with that ambition. She reached out and picked up the leather journal Lucas had discarded. The brown paper was torn, the cover scuffed from sliding across the table. You didn't finish looking at your gift, Louisa said. It's a diary. Lucas sneered, trying to regain some footing. I don't need... Open the back cover, she commanded. Her voice wasn't a request. It was an order. Lucas hesitated, then reached out with a shaking hand. He opened the back of the journal. Tucked into a small leather pocket was a slip of paper. He pulled it out. It was a cashier's check. Pay to the order of Sterling Tech. Amount $20,000. Signed Alara Thorne. Lucas felt the blood drain from his face so fast he nearly fainted. The numbers swam before his eyes. $20 million. It was exactly the amount he needed to save his company from bankruptcy. It was the amount he was trying to beg Chloe's father for. And it had been sitting on the table wrapped in brown paper while he mocked her. I liquidated one of my smaller trust funds, Louisa said, her voice devoid of emotion. I was going to give this to you tonight. No strings attached, no merger, no hostile takeover. Just a wife believing in her husband. Chloe Vanderhoven, who had been silent, leaned forward and snatched the check from Lucas's hand. She stared at it, verified the watermark, and then looked at Louisa with wide, terrified eyes. It's real, Chloe whispered. It's drawn from the Sovereign Bank of Zurich. It was real, Louisa corrected. She plucked the check from Chloe's fingers. With deliberate, slow movement, she tore it in half, then in quarters, then into confetti. She let the pieces rain down onto the untouched plate of oysters Rockefeller. No! Lucas lunged forward, grabbing at the paper scraps as if they were life itself. Louisa, don't! We can talk about this. I was stressed. The merger pressure. You know how I get. I do know how you get, Louisa said. You get cruel, you get small. Sebastian placed a heavy hand on Louisa's shoulder. We are leaving Alara. The air in here is stale. Wait! Monica stood up, knocking her chair over. She rushed around the table, grabbing Louisa's arm. Louisa, darling, please. Lucas loves you. We all do. I was testing you. Yes, it was a test, just like you tested him. Mothers have to be protective. You understand that, don't you? We can start over. Tomorrow. Brunch at the plaza. My treat. Louisa looked at Monica's hand on her arm. She didn't pull away violently. She just looked at the hand with such intense distaste that Monica instinctively let go. "You called me a stain on the tablecloth, Monica," Louisa said. "I suggest you worry less about brunch and more about your living arrangements. The condo you live in on the Upper East Side, Thorn Global purchased the building this morning. We're turning it into a shelter for displaced families." Monica gasped, clutching her pearls. "You can't evict me." "I can," Louisa said simply. "And I will." Louisa turned to Lucas one last time. He was still holding the torn pieces of the check, looking like a man holding the ashes of his future. "I wanted to be your wife, Lucas. I was ready to build a life with you. But you didn't want a partner. You wanted a stepping stone. Well, you stepped on the wrong stone." "Let's go," Sebastian said. The two bodyguards stepped forward to clear a path. As Louisa walked away, head held high, the entire restaurant watched. She didn't look back. She walked out of the rain-slicked world of Lucas Sterling and into the waiting armored Rolls-Royce Phantom that had pulled up to the curb. Inside the restaurant, Lucas sat amidst the wreckage of his anniversary dinner. The check for the meal, $800, sat on the table. Chloe Vanderhoven stood up, grabbed her Chanel bag, and looked at Lucas with sneering disgust. "You idiot," she hissed. "You had a winning lottery ticket and you set it on fire." "Chloe, wait," Lucas pleaded. "My company? Your dad's fund? My dad doesn't invest in morons," she said. "And he certainly doesn't go to war with Sebastian Thorn. Don't call me." She walked out. Lucas was left alone with his mother, the torn check, and a divorce settlement that was now the only thing he had left to sign. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Sterling Tech building, but inside the atmosphere was dark. Lucas hadn't slept. He was wearing the same suit from the night before, the collar unbuttoned, his eyes red-rimmed. He sat in his corner office, staring at the stock ticker on his screen. Sterling Tech SRT $12.40, V or 18%. News traveled fast. The incident at the Obsidian Room hadn't hit the papers yet. Thorne's people were good at scrubbing tabloids, but the whispers in the financial sector traveled at the speed of light. Everyone knew Lucas Sterling had offended the Thorne family. Capital is a coward. It runs at the first sign of trouble. And Sebastian Thorne was not just trouble, he was an apocalypse. "Mr. Sterling," Lucas looked up. His assistant, acute anxiety written all over her face, stood in the doorway. "What is it, Sarah?" The board is here. They want to see you. Now." Lucas rubbed his face. "I didn't call a board meeting." "They called it," Sarah whispered. Lucas grabbed his jacket and marched toward the conference room. He needed to spin this. He needed to tell them that the Thorne connection was actually an opportunity. He could lie. He was good at lying. He pushed open the double glass doors. The long mahogany table was full. 7 board members sat there, their faces grim. At the head of the table, Lucas's seat, sat a man he didn't recognize. He was young, sharp-featured, wearing a suit that cost more than Lucas's car. "Who are you?" Lucas demanded. "Get out of my chair." The man smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I'm Julian Thorne, Louisa's cousin, and this isn't your chair anymore." "This is my company," Lucas shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I founded it. I own 51% of the voting shares." "Actually," Julian said, sliding a thick file folder across the table, "you don't." Lucas grabbed the file. He flipped through the pages, his confusion turning to horror. "You leveraged your shares," Julian explained calmly. 3 months ago, to secure the bridge loan from Apex Capital when your cash flow dried up, you put up your personal equity as collateral. So what I'm making the payments. Apex Capital is a subsidiary of Thorn Global, Julian said, checking his fingernails. And buried in the fine print of that loan agreement clause, 14 Section B, is a stipulation that if the borrower engages in conduct detrimental to the reputation of the lender, the loan can be called in immediately. Conduct detrimental, Lucas sputtered. I haven't done anything to Apex. You insulted the niece of the chairman, Julian said, his eyes flashing. In our family, that is considered highly detrimental. Julian stood up. We called the loan at 8:00 a.m. You didn't have the $12 million cash on hand. Therefore, per the contract, your collateral, your 51% stake in Sterling Tech, has been seized by Apex Capital. Lucas looked around the room. The other board members refused to meet his eyes. They had already made their deals. They wanted to survive. "You stole my company," Lucas whispered. "We repossessed it," Julian corrected. "And frankly, we're doing it a favor. Your code is sloppy. Your management is erratic. And your treatment of employees, specifically one employee named Louisa, was poor." "She didn't even work here." "Oh, but she did." Julian grinned. "Who do you think fixed the kernel panic in the server architecture last Christmas? You were drunk at a party. Louisa stayed up all night rewriting your back end. She did the work. You took the credit." The memory hit Lucas like a physical blow. He remembered that night. He had come home to find Louisa asleep at his laptop, lines of code on the screen. He had just assumed she was browsing the web. He submitted the patch the next morning and won an award for it. She knows Python," Lucas mumbled. "She has a PhD in computational mathematics from MIT, Julian said. "She finished it when she was 19. She didn't tell you because she didn't want to intimidate you. Apparently your ego is as fragile as your stock price." Security guards appeared at the door. Not the regular building security, but the same tactical-style guards from the restaurant. "Lucas Sterling," Julian said formally, "you are hereby terminated from the position of CEO effective immediately. You are barred from the premises. Any attempt to access company servers will be treated as corporate espionage." "You can't do this," Lucas screamed as the guards grabbed his arms. "I built this. I am Sterling Tech." "Not anymore," Julian said, sitting down in the leather chair. "Now it's just Tech. We're removing the Sterling. It tested poorly with focus groups." Lucas was dragged out of the conference room past the glass walls where his employees watched. He saw pity in their eyes. He saw amusement. He was thrown out onto the sidewalk of the financial district. His access badge clattered to the ground next to him. He stood up, brushing off his suit. He reached for his phone to call Chloe. Maybe she would understand. Maybe she could talk to her dad. Blocked. He called his mother. "Lucas!" Monica's voice was hysterical. "They're here! The movers! They're putting my antique vanity on the curb." "Lucas, do something, fix this." "I can't, Mom," Lucas whispered. "I lost the company." "You what?" Her screech was ear-splitting. "You useless boy! You had a billionaire wife and you threw her away for a discount socialite. Don't come here. I don't have room for failures." The line went dead. Lucas stood alone on the street corner. It started to rain again. He looked up at the skyscraper he used to rule. High above, on the 40th floor, he saw a silhouette standing by the window. It was a woman. She placed a hand on the glass, looking down. Even from this distance he knew. It was Louisa. She was up there in his office, reclaiming everything he had built on the foundation of her silent support. She didn't wave. She just watched him get wet. 1 week later, the New York Charity Gala, often called the Winter Met, was the most significant social event of the season. It was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Tickets were $50,000 a seat, and even if you had the money, you had to be invited. Lucas Sterling stood behind the velvet ropes amidst the paparazzi and the screaming fans. He wasn't on the guest list. He was wearing a tuxedo he had managed to keep before his credit cards were frozen, but it looked tired. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. He was desperate. He needed to see Louisa. He had convinced himself that if he could just talk to her away from her terrifying uncle and her smug cousin, he could remind her of the good times. The first year. The laughter. He could gaslight her back into loving him. It was his only play. "Back up," a security guard grunted, shoving Lucas back into the crowd of onlookers. "I need to speak to someone inside my wife," Lucas yelled. "Yeah, and I'm married to J-Lo. Back up, pal." A hush fell over the crowd. The flashes of the cameras went into a frenzy, creating a strobe light effect that illuminated the night. A convoy of 3 black SUVs pulled up, but these weren't standard Uber blacks. These carried the crest of the Thorne family on the flags mounted on the hoods. The doors opened. First, Sebastian Thorne emerged looking regal in a tuxedo with a velvet lapel. He offered his hand to the person inside. A leg extended. A stiletto heel encrusted with diamonds touched the red carpet. Louisa stepped out. The crowd gasped. Lucas stopped breathing. Gone was the mousy woman in the blue department store dress. Alara Thorne was a vision of terrifying beauty. She wore a custom crimson gown that clung to her curves like liquid fire. The train trailed 6 feet behind her. Around her neck sat the heart of the ocean's rival, a sapphire and diamond necklace that was rumored to belong to a European royal family. Her hair was swept up in an intricate modern style, exposing her neck. Her makeup was sharp, accentuating her eyes, which scanned the crowd with the confidence of a predator. "Alara! Ilara over here!" the photographers screamed. She paused, turning to the cameras. She didn't smile sweetly. She gave a small, enigmatic smirk. It was the face of a woman who owned the city. Lucas pushed through the crowd, ducking under the arm of a cameraman. "Louisa!" he shouted. "Louisa!" The sound of his voice seemed to cut through the noise, or perhaps she just sensed him. Her eyes snapped toward the barrier. She saw him. Lucas waved frantically. "Louisa! It's me! Please!" Sebastian noticed him and frowned, signaling security. But Louisa raised a hand, stopping her uncle. She whispered something to the head of security. The guard nodded and walked over to the velvet rope. He unhooked it. "Mrs. Thorne Vance will see you. Briefly." Lucas felt a surge of triumph. She still loves me, he thought. She can't resist me. He smoothed his hair and walked onto the red carpet, ignoring the boos from the crowd who recognized him as the idiot CEO from the news. He approached her on the steps of the museum. Up close, she was blinding. The scent of her perfume, something rare and spicy, filled his senses. "Louisa," he breathed, reaching for her hands. "Thank God, you look incredible." She didn't take his hands. She stood on the step above him, looking down. "Ilara," she corrected him. "Louisa is dead. You killed her." "Baby, please. I've lost everything," Lucas said, pitching his voice to sound pathetic. "The company, the house, my mom won't talk to me. I'm sleeping in a motel in Queens. I've learned my lesson. I know I was wrong. I was blinded by stress. Take me back. I don't care about the money. I just want you." It was a good performance. It had worked on her a dozen times before when he forgot her birthday or blew off date night. Louisa studied his face. For a second, her expression softened. Lucas's heart leaped. "You don't care about the money?" she asked. "No, never. I only care about us." "Good," she said. She turned to the crowd, to the cameras that were broadcasting live. "Ladies and gentlemen." Louisa's voice rang out clear and commanding. The paparazzi went silent. "Tonight I am making a personal donation to the Refugee Relief Fund." She turned back to Lucas, a small smile playing on her lips. "My ex-husband here says he doesn't care about material things. He wants to prove his love." She reached out and deftly unbuttoned his tuxedo jacket. Lucas froze, confused but hopeful. Was she undressing him? "He is wearing a Patek Philippe Nautilus," Louisa announced to the cameras. "Ref 5711. Market value approximately $150,000. She grabbed his wrist. "Give it to me, Lucas." "What? No, this is my—" "To prove you don't care about money," she whispered, her eyes hard as diamonds. "Give it to the charity, now, or security throws you out." Lucas looked at the camera lenses pointed at him. He looked at Louisa. He realized he was trapped. If he refused, he proved he was a gold digger. If he gave it, he lost the last asset he had to sell for food. Trembling, he unclasped the watch. Louisa took it. She held it up high. "Sold!" she shouted. "To the gentleman in the front row for $200,000. She tossed the watch to an assistant. "And now," Louisa said, turning back to Lucas, "get off my carpet. You're blocking the view." "But you said—" "I said nothing about taking you back," she replied coldly. "I just wanted to see if you were still a liar. You are. You mourned the watch more than you mourned our marriage." She turned on her heel, the red dress swirling around her legs like a pool of blood. She took Sebastian's arm and ascended the stairs into the museum. Lucas was left standing on the empty red carpet, wrist bare, while the crowd laughed. The security guards moved in, gripping his arms. "Show's over, pal," the guard said. As they dragged him away, Lucas looked up at the museum entrance. He saw Chloe Vanderhoven entering with a new man. She saw Lucas being hauled off and didn't even blink. Inside the gala, Louisa took a glass of champagne. Her hand wasn't shaking. "That was cruel," Sebastian noted with approval. "He humiliated me in front of 3 people, Louisa said, taking a sip. "I humiliated him in front of 3 million. We're even." "Not quite," Sebastian said, checking his phone. "Phase 3 of the acquisition is complete. We now own the patent to his original algorithm. What do you want to do with it?" Louisa thought for a moment. "Open source it. Give it away for free to every developer in the world. Make his life's work worth 0. Sebastian smiled. "Welcome back to the family, Alara." 3 months had passed since the night at the museum. The world had moved on, but Lucas Sterling had not. He was living in a studio apartment in the shadow of the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. The wallpaper was peeling, the radiator hissed like a dying cat, and the view was a brick wall. It was a far cry from the penthouse overlooking Central Park, and the disparity was driving him mad. He spent his days drinking cheap whiskey and scouring the internet for news of Alara Thorne. She was everywhere. Forbes cover, Vogue feature. She was launching a new tech initiative called Vance Systems, named after her alias, a final slap in the face to him. Lucas wasn't just broke. He was bitter. And bitterness is a powerful fuel. One rainy Tuesday, while digging through boxes of old files he had managed to salvage from his office before security threw him out, he found it. A hard drive. It was an external drive labeled Project Genesis, Backup 2021. Lucas's hands trembled as he plugged it into his battered laptop. He clicked through the folders. It contained the source code for the original Sterling Tech algorithm. But deep in the metadata in the commit logs, he saw something he had forgotten. The user ID for the commits wasn't L. Sterling. It was E. Vance. Louisa had written the code on his computer. She had done the work, yes, but she had done it on company property, his laptop, while they were married. A slow, wicked smile spread across Lucas's face. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number he had found on a bus bench advertisement. Marcus Vane, attorney at law. We fight for the little guy. Marcus Vane wasn't a high-powered corporate lawyer. He was a shark who swam in the sewers. He met Lucas at a diner that smelled of grease and regret. Vane wore a suit that was too shiny and a tie that was too wide. He listened to Lucas's story, his eyes narrowing as he calculated the potential payout. "Let me get this straight," Vane said, picking his teeth with a toothpick. "She wrote the code. But she did it while married to you on your hardware for your company without a contract stating otherwise." "Exactly," Lucas said, leaning in. "And now Thorne Global is using a derivative of that code for their new banking security system. That system is worth billions." Vane whistled. "Under New York intellectual property law, and considering the lack of a separation agreement regarding IP at the time, we could argue that the code is marital property. Or better yet, that since she was acting as an employee of Sterling Tech de facto, the IP belongs to you. Can we sue her?" "Sue her." Vane laughed. "Kid, we're going to file an injunction. We're going to claim she stole trade secrets from Sterling Tech to build her new empire. We'll freeze her assets. The Thorne family hates bad press. They'll settle just to make us go away." "How much?" Lucas asked, his throat dry. $50 million, Vane said. "Minimum." The plan was set. They filed the paperwork the next morning. The reaction was instantaneous. The media, always hungry for a scandal involving the untouchable Thorne family, went into a frenzy. Headline: heiress or thief. Ex-husband sues Elara Thorne for IP theft. The narrative shifted. Suddenly, Louisa wasn't just the victim of a bad marriage. She was potentially a corporate spy. The stock price of Thorne Global took a minor hit. Lucas sat in his studio apartment watching the news. He felt powerful again. He had thrown a rock at a giant, and the giant had flinched. 2 days later, he received a courier package. It wasn't a settlement check. It was a simple card embossed with the Thorne crest. Meet me. 10:30 p.m. tonight. The Blue Line Diner. It was the diner where they had first met. Lucas shaved for the first time in weeks. He put on his only remaining good suit. He felt a surge of adrenaline. She was breaking. She wanted to meet in person, off the record. That meant she was scared. That meant she was ready to pay. He arrived at the diner early. It was a 24-hour spot, fluorescent lit and smelling of coffee and bleach. He sat in the booth, their booth near the window. At exactly 10:00 p.m., the door chimed. Louisa walked in. She wasn't wearing the red dress or the diamonds this time. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere trench coat and sunglasses despite the darkness. She looked like a 1940s film noir star. 2 bodyguards waited outside, their silhouettes looming against the glass. She slid into the booth opposite him. She removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were tired but sharp. "Lucas," she said. "Louisa," he replied, using her old name on purpose. He leaned back, spreading his arms. "Or should I call you the defendant?" "You sued me," she said quietly. "Marcus Vane, a strip mall lawyer with a history of ambulance chasing. He's good enough to freeze your assets." Lucas smirked. "Admit it, Louisa. I got you. That code was on my laptop. It's mine. You built your new reputation on stolen goods." "I wrote that code to save you," she said, her voice devoid of anger, filled instead with a strange disappointment. "I stayed up for 3 nights straight because you were crying in the bathroom about losing your investors. I did it out of love." "Love doesn't hold up in court," Lucas said coldly. "Contracts do, and you didn't have one." He leaned forward across the sticky table. "Here's the deal. I dropped the lawsuit. You publicly admit that I contributed to the code, and you write me a check for $50 million. Consider it severance pay for the marriage." Louisa looked at him for a long time. The waitress came over with a pot of coffee. Louisa waved her away. "You really think this is about the money, don't you?" Louisa asked. "It's always about the money, Elara. You taught me that at the anniversary dinner." Louisa sighed. She reached into her bag. Lucas tensed, expecting a checkbook. Instead, she pulled out a thick manila envelope and placed it on the table. "I didn't come here to negotiate a settlement, Lucas," she said softly. "I came here to give you a chance to run." Lucas laughed. "Run? Why would I run? I'm winning." "Open the envelope." Lucas hesitated, his smile faltering. He picked up the envelope. It was heavy. He undid the clasp and slid the contents out. It wasn't legal paperwork. It was a series of photographs and bank transfer records. The first photo showed Lucas meeting with a man in a dark alley. Lucas recognized the man immediately. It was Oleg Vorsky, a known loan shark associated with the Russian mob. "You borrowed $3 million from Vorsky to keep Sterling Tech afloat before the merger talks started," Louisa said. "You didn't tell me. You cooked the books to hide the debt." Lucas went pale. How did you get this?" "I own the bank Vorsky uses to launder his money," Louisa said simply. "So what?" Lucas stammered. "I paid him back." "No," Louisa corrected. "You paid the interest. The principal is still outstanding, and since Sterling Tech collapsed, you stopped paying. Vorsky is impatient." She pointed to the second document. "But that's not the worst part, Lucas. Look at the second page." Lucas turned the page. It was a forensic accounting report of Sterling Tech's finances. When you realized the company was failing, you didn't just borrow money. Louisa explained, her voice hardening. You moved employee pension funds into your personal offshore account in the Caymans to protect yourself. Lucas felt like the booth was shrinking. The air was too hot. That was a temporary holding strategy. It's embezzlement, Louisa said. It's a federal crime, punishable by up to 20 years in prison. She leaned in, her blue eyes piercing through his soul. I have the FBI on speed dial, Lucas. My uncle is having dinner with the district attorney of New York right now. All I have to do is send one text message and this file goes to them. You won't just be poor, you'll be an inmate. Lucas dropped the papers. His hands were shaking so hard the silverware rattled. The $50 million vanished from his mind. Now he was just thinking about survival. Louisa, please, he whispered, the arrogance completely gone. I made a mistake. The lawsuit. I'll drop it. I'll fire Vane. Just don't send this. The lawsuit is already dead, Louisa said. But my problem is you. You keep coming back. You keep trying to hurt me, like a disease that won't go away. I'll disappear, Lucas promised, tears welling in his eyes. I swear, I'll leave New York. You'll never see me again. Louisa looked at him. She remembered the man she had loved. She remembered the way he used to look at her before the money corrupted him. A flicker of pity crossed her face, but she killed it instantly. She was a thorn now. You have 24 hours, Louisa said. Louisa stood up and buttoned her cashmere coat. She looked down at the man cowering in the booth, the man she had once thought was her entire world. 24 hours to do what? Lucas asked, his voice cracking. To leave the country, Louisa replied. She pulled a single plane ticket from her pocket and tossed it onto the table. Lucas looked at it. One way, economy class, JFK to Bangkok. Thailand. Lucas gasped. It has a very low cost of living, Louisa said dryly, and no extradition treaty for the specific financial crimes you committed. You'll be safe there as long as you never ever set foot on U.S. soil again. But I don't know anyone in Bangkok. I don't speak the language. You're smart, Lucas. You're a visionary, remember? You'll figure it out. Maybe you can get a job as a waiter. Learn some humility. Louisa turned to leave. Wait, Lucas cried out. He scrambled out of the booth, grabbing the hem of her coat. The bodyguards stepped forward instantly, their hands moving to their holsters, but Louisa held up a hand. Lucas fell to his knees on the dirty diner floor. Louisa, don't do this. I'm your husband. Well, ex-husband. We had something real once. Doesn't that mean anything? Louisa looked down at him. She saw the pathetic desperation. She realized finally that he had never truly loved her. He had loved the way she made him feel superior. He loved having a cheerleader. It meant everything to me, Lucas, she said softly. That's why this hurts. But you didn't mock me because you were stressed. You mocked me because you thought I was beneath you. You revealed your true character when you thought no one was watching. That is a stain that doesn't wash out. She pulled her coat free from his grip. Goodbye, Lucas. If you aren't on that plane at 6:30 a.m., the file goes to the FBI. And Vorsky will be told where you live. She walked out of the diner, the bell chiming cheerfully behind her. Louisa stepped out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. The city lights of New York glittered like diamonds spilled on black velvet. Sebastian Thorne was leaning against the side of the armored SUV waiting for her. Is it done? Sebastian asked. It's done, Louisa said. She took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp air. For the first time in 5 years, she felt completely light. The weight of the secret, the weight of the lies, the weight of trying to be enough for a small man, it was all gone. Did he take the ticket? He had no choice, Louisa said. Sebastian nodded. He opened the car door for her. We have a board meeting in Tokyo in 12 hours. The jet is fueled. Louisa paused. She looked back at the diner. Through the window, she could see Lucas sitting alone, his head in his hands, staring at the plane ticket. Uncle Sebastian, Louisa said. Yes, Elara. Who owns this diner? Sebastian raised an eyebrow. I believe it's a family-owned establishment. The Popovich brothers. Why? Buy it, Louisa said. Give them double whatever it's worth. I want to keep it. As an investment? As a reminder. Louisa smiled. I want to turn it into a foundation. A place where women who are starting over women who have nothing can get a hot meal, a suit for an interview, and a grant to start their own businesses. I want to call it the Obsidian Foundation. Sebastian smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. A fitting name? Turning a place of memory into a place of power. Your grandfather would be proud. I think he would, Louisa said. She got into the car. As the convoy pulled away, merging into the stream of traffic, Louisa pulled out her phone. She opened her banking app. Account balance. $4, $200, $1,000. $1,000. She transferred a substantial sum to the Refugee Relief Fund and another to the new foundation account. Then she locked the phone. She wasn't Louisa the waitress anymore. She wasn't Mrs. Lucas Sterling. She was Alara Thorne, and she had an empire to run. 6 months later. A humid afternoon in Bangkok. The air smelled of street food and exhaust. A man in a stained white shirt was wiping down a plastic table at a roadside noodle stall. He looked older than his years, his face gaunt, his hair thinning. Hey, table 3 needs water, the owner shouted in broken English. Coming, Lucas muttered. He hurried over with a pitcher of water. The customer, a young backpacker with a laptop, was watching a video on YouTube. Lucas glanced at the screen as he poured the water. It was a news clip. A beautiful woman in a sharp business suit was cutting the ribbon on a new skyscraper in Manhattan. The chyron read, Alara Thorne, the $1 trillion woman. Lucas froze. He stared at her face. She looked happy. She looked unstoppable. Excuse me, buddy, you're overflowing the glass, the backpacker snapped. Lucas snapped out of it. Water was spilling all over the table. Sorry. He wiped up the mess with a rag. As he walked back to the kitchen to wash dishes, he touched the pocket where he kept a crumpled, torn photograph of a woman in a blue dress. He had wanted a queen. He had found one. And because he was a fool, he was now serving noodles to tourists while she ruled the world. He scrubbed the plate harder, trying to wash away the memory, but some stains are permanent. And that is the story of how Lucas Sterling learned the most expensive lesson of his life: never judge a book or a wife by the cover. He thought he was discarding a broken waitress, but he was actually throwing away the key to the kingdom. Louisa, or rather Alara, proved that true power isn't about shouting the loudest or wearing the most expensive watch. It's about knowing exactly who you are, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. What would you have done if you were in Louisa's shoes? Would you have given Lucas a second chance, or was the one-way ticket to Bangkok exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and sweet justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. Until next time.